And that'll do it. It's over. The Golden State Warriors return to a familiar place. They're on top of the NBA world.
The Warriors are back on top. Words I thought I might not be hearing for quite some time after watching the dominance the Warriors showed over the course of the past decade, as they were one of the greatest dynasties the league has ever seen. In the 2014 season, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green and company broke onto the scene, tearing through competition and claiming stake as the next great team in the NBA. Things continued in the 2015-2016 where they went 73-9 and broke the single season wins record. Then they added Kevin Durant and went on to win 2 straight titles. All eyes were on the Warriors the next year. Could they be the first team to three-peat since Jordan's Bulls? Well, a series of injuries never let us see the answer to that question. And after that, we all saw the downfall of the Warriors right in front of us. They're riddled with injury and posted consecutive losing seasons. It was finally the end for the Warriors. Or so we thought. Because just like that, the Warriors have won another title. And while there are many things that can be taken away from this series, there is one guy I look at the most. One guy who, to me, once again, has shown me his true greatness and shown me that he is a top 10 player to ever play the game of basketball. That guy being none other than Steph Curry. The NBA's all-time greats, a collection of players spanning across all eras, the guys who were the best to ever lay hands on a basketball, all with different skill sets and different styles and different personalities and different impacts on the game. Over the years, there have been around 30 to 40 guys who have fit this mold. To be an all-time great player, you're going to be one of the best to ever do it at your position. You're either going to be good at everything or just so great at something specific that your game is special. An all-time great player changes a team, is almost always the best player on the court, and they are game-defining players. I think of guys like Allen Iverson. I think of guys like Dirk Nowitzki. And I don't think that anyone's debating the fact that Steph Curry is one of these kinds of players. But when talking about NBA rankings, there are all-time greats like the guys I listed, and then there are guys who are top 10, special all-time players. Those players being the obvious ones like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't think you'll get many guys arguing about Magic Johnson or Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Tim Duncan. Those types of special all-time players. And I think the question that all of us are asking ourselves right now is, where does Steph Curry fit amongst all this? Does he truly fit with all of the Magic Johnsons and the Kobe Bryants of the world? Is he really one of the 10 greatest players to ever play the game of basketball? Or is Steph Curry not there quite yet? Is he just another guy who will be remembered as great, but never truly one of the greatest of all time? Well, the first question we must ask ourselves is, what separates the top 10 caliber players from being just another all-time great player? And to me, it's a few things. The first is being the greatest ever at something particular, or being good to great at every aspect of basketball. I look at a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, who is maybe the best paint threat of all time. Magic Johnson, one of the best passers we have ever seen. And then do-it-all guys like Jordan and LeBron, who are just excellent across the board. So that is the first thing. And then the second being that all of the players on the top 10 list make their teammates better. Whether it be by being one of the best passers of all time, like LeBron or Magic, or just being so dominant that the defense has to do so much more to defend them that it leaves opportunities for other guys, like a Shaq or a Michael Jordan. Not only are these guys some of the best individual offensive and defensive players of all time, but they are also some of the best ever at making the other guys on the court with them better. Which in basketball, we all know is just as important. And third, in general, at their peak, all of these players were at minimum unanimously a top 2 to 3 player on the planet. And so those are the things, in my mind, that I found that separate the all-time greats from the guys who define the history of basketball. The guys who are top 10 of all time. To be one of those guys, that is what you have to do. So, now why you clicked on the video in the first place. Where does Steph Curry fit into all of this? Well, does he fit the criteria for being a Mount Rushmore type of guy? Well, the first criteria was to either be the greatest to ever do it at something or to be extremely well-rounded and good at everything. And well, for Curry, we all know he is the greatest shooter to ever play the game of basketball. And it's not even remotely close. Don't believe me? Well, here's a chart I made of the top 10 players who made the most three-pointers and how many games it took them to get there. We've got guys like Ray Allen, Reggie Miller, some of the greatest three shooters to ever do it. All of these players have had to be elite shooters and then do it for such a long time. Well, that is, except for Steph Curry, who has made far and away more three-pointers than any other player in the history of the NBA, and his career is nowhere near done just yet. And when he is done, it will likely be a record that holds up for quite some time. And Steph Curry also made these threes at a higher rate than almost anyone, 42.7% over his career. Higher than Ray Allen, higher than Reggie Miller, higher than Klay Thompson, higher than almost everyone ever. Here are just a few more shooting records that Steph Curry holds if you're not already convinced he is the greatest shooter of all time. And he was doing so while often the defense's sole goal is to not let Curry shoot the three ball. But of course, that didn't stop him. So, Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of the basketball of all time. Sure, he may not be the best interior scorer or the best interior defender in the world, but at the end of the day, he didn't need to be. Just like Shaq never needed to be the greatest shooter. Shaq never needed to be the quickest guy on the court to be considered the greatest or one of the greatest of all time at his position, because he was the greatest at something else. And that is exactly what Steph Curry is. Far and away, the greatest shooter to ever play the game of basketball. And that is what makes him special. Now, everyone loves to talk about Steph Curry's shooting, but as some might say, his true greatness in reality goes far beyond that. When talking about the greatest basketball players of all time, they all go beyond being elite individual players and are able to make those around them better. And luckily for Steph, his ability to make his teammates better may be almost as strong of a piece of his game as his shooting. Steph is a great passer, a great playmaker, always able to find the open guy. But Steph's strongest attribute of helping his teammates, in reality, has nothing to do with his passing at all. It's simply just his presence on the court. Stephen Curry, by being one of the best off-ball movers of all time and greatest shooters of all time, soaks up defenders and allows for his teammates to get open. A defense always needs to know where Steph Curry is. They need to play him from way behind the line. They may need to put two guys on him. They are always chasing him around. All of these things, just the threat of Steph Curry, changes the way a defense plays basketball and allows his teammates to thrive because of it. So, Steph Curry is one of the greatest ever at making his teammates better. And now, the third criteria. What about Curry's peak? Was he outshined by LeBron and Durant? Was Curry ever truly a top 2 to 3 player in the league? Well, I would argue that Stephen Curry had one of the greatest peaks that we have ever seen in the NBA. During his unanimous MVP season, which that alone is saying something, as almost no one ever has been a unanimous MVP, Stephen Curry was playing at levels that we have almost never, well actually in fact, never seen before. I'm not a fan of using a player's field goal percentage as an estimate of their shooting, as it does not take into account the fact that making a three-pointer is more difficult than making a two-pointer, and making a three is more valuable. And that's where true shooting percentage comes in, which in my opinion is a much better representation of a player's shooting efficiency, as it does take into account the difference in value and odds of hitting a three-point shot versus a two-point shot. So, to give you an idea of what Steph Curry did in his peak, he scored 30.1 points per game on 67% true shooting, which is absolutely absurd, insanely efficient. To put this in perspective, I made a chart of the top 7 most efficient players who were able to score 30 or more points a game in a season. On this list, you can see some of the greatest players and offensive scorers who have ever played the game. Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. These were the greatest scoring seasons of all time. But one guy, at his peak, stands above the rest. That guy being none other than Steph Curry, who once again shot an unheard of 67% true shooting while averaging over 30 a game on the best team in the league. At his peak, Steph Curry may not have only been the best scorer of that year, but one of the greatest scorers to have ever played the game of basketball. Steph Curry is everything that it takes to be a top 10 Mount Rushmore type of player in the NBA. Now, as time progresses, there has always been this dark and stormy cloud hovering over Steph Curry over the years. And that is that his success is largely because of his teammates. Being on one of the greatest teams of all time, the fact that he would fit perfectly on the Warriors. Over the years, that has to be the reason that he's had so much success. But my question is, why should we hold this against Steph Curry? Almost every NBA great ever to win a championship has had elite help. Michael Jordan had Pippen and Rodman with Phil Jackson. LeBron had his share of great teammates. Kareem with Magic. Shaq had Kobe. They almost all won when they had great teams around them. So why do we take this from Steph and not from any of these other greats? Because yes, he had great teams to win with, but he did win with them. Just like many of the all-time greats of the past. And yes, the Warriors were perfect for Steph Curry. He was able to grow and become the player he was and peak with a winning and great team and franchise in the Warriors. But once again, why are we holding this against Steph Curry? Because I think that this is almost exactly what happened for two other guys that are almost consensus top 10 players. Those two being none other than Michael Jordan and Tim Duncan. Jordan to the Bulls, a team that drafted him and willingly built around him as their cornerstone. And as Jordan grew with the Bulls, they built one of the greatest teams we have ever seen to win championship after championship. Michael Jordan was the Bulls. Tim Duncan was drafted onto a Spurs team that had not had success in years and was immediately taken in and built around by Greg Popovich to create what would be a relentless style of winning for years, as Duncan was the centerpiece of great team after great team for almost the entirety of his career. Both of these guys were their teams and were praised for coming in and changing everything and being built around on the franchise they were drafted by. So why would things change with Steph when he did and is still doing the exact same thing with the Golden State Warriors? Now, the final question that remains to be asked is, if he is a top 10 player, where does Stephen Curry rank all time? And here is a rough list of who I would rank as my 10 greatest players of all time, and then honorable mentions. And so where does Steph Curry rank among these guys? Well, for me, I would place Steph as the 6th greatest player in the history of basketball, right ahead of Shaquille O'Neal and right behind Magic Johnson. Now, you may ask, what has Stephen Curry done to deserve the placement over all of these all-time greats? Well, I just explained, and I ask right back at you, what has he not done to deserve this placement over a guy like Shaquille O'Neal or Wilt? Yes, Shaq was one of the most uniquely dominant players we have ever seen in the league. He was unstoppable. Defenses had to change how they played to defend Shaq. Well, the same is true for Steph Curry. What about Larry Bird's shooting and his elite versatility on offense and his contribution to some of the greatest Celtics teams of all time? Well, what about Steph Curry being the greatest shooter of all time and being the centerpiece of potentially some of the greatest teams the NBA has ever seen? The NBA community loves to look back and reminisce over the greats of the past. The guys who did it way back when, the untouchables. Well, I say, let's appreciate what's occurring right in front of us, right in front of our eyes. Steph Curry becoming one of the greatest and most influential basketball players to have ever played the game of basketball.